We'll go to the finals, and of course, the Naroditsky Cup up for grabs at the end of the Speed Chess Championship. There we have Denis Lazavik on screen right now. He's looking around like, what's going on? When does this chess begin? That's all he wants to do is play against this man, this beast of a man in Magnus Carlsen, who is afraid of no one, who has been at the top of the game for oh so long now, and who wants to win yet another Speed Chess Championship. And this Speed Chess Championship, it's a special one indeed. And for Denis Lazavik, I mean, this is his first foray into these live SEC finals. He has been a no-name for a long time now, winning Speed Chess Championships, Title Tuesdays, and winning Speed Chess Championship matches, and here we go. The games are underway officially. The 5+1 has begun, and we have a quiet opening, the Italian game from Magnus Carlsen. We see him with the white pieces here. So far, just normal play. White at some point would like to strike in the center with the move pawn to d4, but the pawn on e4 could become vulnerable in that event. So first the bishop slides back. The knight now, if it attacks, the bishop can always retreat to a safe square. And we see Denis actually the first to retreat with his bishop. That way, the pawn push in the center does not come with tempo. Instead, that would actually cause some problems in the white camp. That pawn e4, as mentioned, is a bit loose. The rook slides over to e1, protecting that pawn. It's kind of a prophylactic move. And h6, a nice reply from Denis. White often wants to play this move pawn to h3, but if that move is played in the near future before black castles, the move g5 followed by g4 can rip that side of the board open. It's only after the black king castles, as Denis has just played, then white should consider more seriously that move pawn to h3, and here it is. So Magnus plays it after a bit of a think. Quickly, Denis responds with rook to e8. The knight reroutes itself to f1. We have not had a single piece traded in the semifinals here of the Speed Chess Championship. We're over a minute in on the board time here, but they're just jockeying for position, maneuvering their pieces, and we see that white at some point would like to inch forward with d4, but instead it's black who's first to the punch in the center with d5. And after the capture, Denis here thinking, not sure which piece to recapture with. I personally like the bishop capturing on d5. That opens up this rook to the pawn on e5 that is otherwise vulnerable, and that I think is the best way forward, and there Denis does in fact play that move. So I think Magnus will continue with his typical plan here. He will bring his knight out from the first rank. There it goes to g3. At some point, the knight on f5 can be very dangerous for that black king. Watch out for sacrifices, and that's why this move queen to d7 was played here by Denis Lazavik. A quick choice by him. I like it a lot. He's connecting his rooks. He's stopping one of the main points of that knight jump, the knight leaping forward, but not forward enough if you want to go for an attack. So I really like the way both players are playing thus far. The queen slides forward. Now white is about to perhaps connect those rooks. This pawn e5 is defended enough times from the black perspective, and you see that rook a to d8. So in some ways, black has maximized his play. He's optimized the location of his pieces. So the question becomes, what next from Denis Lazavik's perspective? And in the meantime, for Magnus, he needs to come up with a plan, because if he plays quiet moves like bishop d2, he's not really accomplishing all that much. So a4, to me, that suggests that he wants to push forward on the queen side, but speaking of pushing forward on the queen side quickly, Denis Lazavik plays the move a5, stopping white from expanding so quickly with this move pawn to b4. I like the way both players are playing. I think that the level nature of the evaluation bar is accurate, and I see the many fans in attendance here who are just analyzing the position, trying to figure out what's next. And it's one of these dynamics here where both players, I mean, they're kind of waiting for the opponent to do something major. At the moment, everything is calm, cool, and collected, but maybe in the near future, black will reroute the bishop to f8. That's a common plan. That's why the bishop did slide back to c5. It keeps the king safe and sound. And in response, white can consider a move like knight to e4 at any moment, just trying to offer the exchange of pieces. And white does want to play this move d4, this bishop on c2. It wants to become a really nasty piece on the long diagonal, but you can't get away with that, not for the foreseeable future. So far, it seems like both players are acquitting themselves nicely, and it's, I think, a good moment just to sit and think about where the next direction is going to happen. And knight e4, well, it offers a trade. Denis does not trade on Magnus's terms. He doesn't want to allow this pawn to capture hitting his bishop. Instead, he brings his queen to e6 to protect the knight. I prefer black's position. I think it's healthier. It's a bit more active. You can see many different pieces here. Let's turn that one blue because it's good, but all of these pieces are looking more active on more advanced squares than many of the white counterparts. So Denis ahead by half a minute on the clock. doing really well on the board. With the queen on e6, there could be a time and place where bishop to b3 is the move for choice. And I think that black is doing very, very well here. And we see the players here on camera. First, Magnus Carlsen in his little cubicle. I mean, it looks spacious. It looks well lit up. And for Magnus, he does want to find a way to do something active. And knight h2. He moves his knight, yes, on the rim, but it's a very clear plan. He wants to actually move forward with this knight up to the g4 square eventually and try to gain some space. But Denis with a direct attack on Magnus's queen. You see Denis here on camera. He's locked in, focused, just trying to make Magnus's life as difficult as possible, as now Magnus offers a queen trade. So in a typical match, Magnus Carlsen, the endgame maestro, he knows how to grind like a grandmaster, but Denis Lazavik lost precisely 0 games at the World Rapid Championship in 2025. He is as solid as they come. He is a player who just can compete with anybody after liquidation. So you see that Denis is unfazed. He brings his bishop to c5, a more active square, and Magnus says, let's trade off some pieces. Why don't we do this thing along the d file? And that is the only open file. So at the moment, the players are a bit restricted in terms of what they can really accomplish. But for Magnus Carlsen, he says, all right, let's get some of the pieces off the board. And the player with less space often wants fewer pieces on the board, because those players step on each other's toes. So here the bishop slides back to c1. Maybe one pair of rooks come off. Maybe both pairs come off in the near future. But there's nothing at the moment that Denis should really be afraid of. I guess the opponent in front of him, but as Denis has previously said in interviews, he loves playing online because those nerves, that psychology is not as impactful when you play into the screen versus staring into your opponent's eyes. So knight to f1 has been played by Magnus Carlsen. He is clearly trying to improve the location of his steed. Maybe bishop e3 next. If that knight can gallop into the d5 square, then we can be talking about a potential advantage for white, and that knight is trying to get to d5. I would not advise the capture of that knight. Just because the knight wants to gallop forward does not mean you want to do any of that. But for these two players at the moment, you see that they're making small moves, king into the center. You use the king as a weapon in the endgame. It's an active piece, or you would like it to be. But I'm just waiting for the moment that Magnus decides to bring his knight out to d5. I think that is the big thing that white can threaten, that pawn on c7 over here. And black can't easily attack anything, at least not yet. For example, the move f5 is not available as long as white's pieces are staring in that direction. So just to note, you see Magnus on screen here. He is trying to just nurse even a slight advantage, and I think really now is the moment for Magnus Carlsen. Denis has been playing really well, but if you're playing for a win, you are up 20 seconds on the clock. This is the first game of the match. You want to kind of put your feet down and just run with it. And Denis quickly responds with bishop d6. Given an exclamation mark, taking on d5 was pretty much out of the question, giving white the 2 bishops on an opening board in the endgame. So bishop d6, I do not mind backtracking if it means that everything is well defended. So bishop comes out to d3. I really like that move from Magnus. He's keeping a 10-second lead on the clock. The bishop can at some point pester this knight, and eventually white wants to play this move b2 to b4 and try to create some progress on the queen side, maybe an outside pass pawn. So the black king, it can go to e8, but that's not really making any progress. So that actually walks into some pins, and I don't think that's what Denis would want. So his king is kind of stuck. The white king, active on e2, would love to maybe run into the queen side in the future. And wow, big moment now after knight to e7. I see a jump and I see the blue arrow. That is not my arrow. That's suggesting that bishop h6 check was just an annoying idea for Magnus. He missed it, and it would have put the king in some uncomfortable territory. So instead, the bishop enters along the b3 square. a4 is now targeted. Bishop b5 defending that weakness is actually not sufficient. That black would have played c6 to kick the bishop out of there. And look at Denis, avoiding trades for the moment. But if you're Magnus Carlsen, you're definitely thinking about this move, pawn b2 to b4, hoping that there's a trade on that square, because ultimately you would love to get an outside pass pawn running, dashing to the other side. So we have repeated moves here, and Magnus goes forward. That's actually really surprising. I thought the move here is c6, kicks the bishop out, and then the a4 pawn drops. So maybe Magnus has found something that allows him to get away with this, or perhaps he's just made a mistake, because to me, c6, that seems like a very obvious reply, and Denis has played it. So I'm curious for Magnus's reaction here. Quickly plays bishop c4, but what is he doing? He has dropped a pawn on a4. Objectively speaking, this was just a mistake. I don't actually think that there is a reason to mince words. Like, this gave his opponent a free pawn. The next move can be bishop b5. Your bishop's not going to get trapped by the pawn push to b3, and that leaves black a healthy pawn up. And if you take, now there's just going to be an outside pass pawn. So this has been Denis Lazavik actually, I don't want to say outplaying Magnus, because he could have repeated moves if he wanted, but Magnus, I guess, going for more against a player who is sort of his own preference style. He loves the end game. He loves playing these long, drawn-out battles where little nuances here and there could actually amount to big pluses. And right now, black is well ahead, an extra pawn. I'm not claiming it's enough to win, especially against such a strong endgame player like Magnus Carlsen, but it's clear that Denis Lazavik is the side for choice. It's playing for 2 results. Only he can win. He may even consider taking this knight on e3 and playing knight against bishop. The reason he may want to do that, bishops are great on open boards, but in the endgame, they're restricted inherently to their own color. The knight can jump from dark to light squares, and it can pose some serious issues for Magnus. As Magnus drops to about 20 seconds, okay, now we're in dangerous territory for sure. The knight drops back. Where's that knight going? Out to g3. Okay, if it goes there, black pushes the pawn and gets out the way. The f5 square is covered. The blue arrow appeared for knight to g3. That wasn't my arrow. It was actually suggesting that was the only move that kept white really towards equality. But now bishop f2 played. The knight, it can't get to g3 where it wants to go. The bishop could safely run around to h4. And because, it goes to g1 instead, I guess that's a safe square as well. It's a little awkward all the way on opponent's starting rank. But you see Denis Lazavik here locked in, Magnus in the background. And right now, I think that Denis, he has pushing his rook pawns on both sides of the board. Magnus desperately trying to create some play for his own pieces. Both players under 10 seconds. You see the time ticking down. Magnus, he may look calm on the surface, but I think he is nervous because it looks like Denis Lazavik with the outside A pawn here. I mean, how do you stop that? The e4 pawn was actually just straight up hanging. It was overlooked by both players. Instead, we see a trade of pieces. I told you about this, the knight versus the bishop. That knight is hopping around the board. Knight e5, knight c4, a3 is coming. And it looks like the first victory of the match is coming for Denis Lazavik because the bishop has to give himself up. Denis wins by resignation, 1-0 in the young Belarusian's favor. Denis Lazavik scores the first point of the match. You can call it an upset, but Denis truly has been here for years.